Good evening. Welcome all of you to the 2020 URI Cooperative Extension Plugged into Energy Research Lecture Series. We are very excited to have you all here tonight to cover a very important topic that is being sponsored by the Rhode Island Energy Efficiency and Resource Management Council, who you will hear more from after tonight's program. My name is Kate Venturini. I am an Extension Educator and Outreach Programs Administrator at URI. I've been very lucky to be part of the team that has curated this year's Plugged into Energy Research Lectures. And tonight we're really excited to have an amazing slate of speakers, to say the least, to talk about energy efficiency in schools, safer buildings, healthier students. The folks that are speaking tonight are experts in their own right, and we're very grateful to them for taking the time out on a Tuesday. No, it's not Tuesday, it's Wednesday evening to share their expertise with all of you. So just a couple housekeeping items and we will get right to the program. First thing is those of you who are out in the audience there, you'll notice there's a Q&A box. And you want to find that now so that when the time comes and you have pressing questions for each of our speakers, you know where to find that Q&A. So please enter your questions into that box at any point. After each speaker, we will take 5 minutes or so for Q&A for each of them. And our wonderful moderator, Manuel, will manage all of that for us. So the other thing I wanted to share is that this session is being recorded and it will be uploaded to the URI Cooperative Extension YouTube channel. So we encourage everyone to share that link once we send it out with all of their friends and family to make sure that the reach of this session goes well beyond those of you who are here tonight. So on behalf of URI Cooperative Extension and the land grant institution that is URI, we're really pleased to bring this science-based information out to you to hopefully help you solve any challenges that may present themselves. And so I'm going to introduce my new friend, Manuel Cordero, who is our moderator tonight. Manuel is a licensed architect in Rhode Island with several years of project experience with large-scale educational and community planning projects. His work at the School Building Authority, or the SBA, at the Rhode Island Department of Education has helped build a nationally recognized school construction program and launched once-in-a-lifetime state investment in public school facilities, which you will surely hear about later this evening. The SBA oversees more than $1 billion in public school construction in Rhode Island. Manuel earned his undergraduate degree from Yale University and his Master's of Architecture degree from the University of California, Berkeley, where it is most likely sunnier than it is here now. So without further ado, Manuel, take it away, and thanks so much for being here.
Thank you very much, Kate, for the wonderful introduction. It's a great pleasure to be here and excited to share the stage with some amazing panelists. I just wanted to start by sharing with you that when this opportunity came up and Kaylin and Kate reached out, I could not say no to this opportunity. And this is because the Energy Fellows have been longtime partners to the School Building Authority. And what's important to note is that over the past decade and since the introduction of the school construction regulations in 2007, the state and particularly the School Building Authority of the Department of Education has had a concerted focus on sustainability in our buildings, and obviously energy efficiency is a big part of that. But we understand that that's tied to safe and healthy buildings, and that's one of the topics that we'll be talking about today. But to kind of tie this back to the Energy Fellows, over this last decade, as we've been doing this work, the Energy Fellows have been great partners to the School Building Authority and to the Department of Education in assisting our districts with a key component, which is measurement, right? We have understood from early on that without measuring, we can't save. And the Energy Fellows have, over the years, provided, and I think you might hear more about this later, provided our district's assistance with some of the measurements and connecting them with some of the resources that are out there for them as they do work in their buildings, particularly work that has to do with efficiency. This is a really difficult time, and as somebody who works at the Department of Education in this moment and talks to superintendents on a daily basis, we know that our districts and our school leaders are grappling with a lot, and our facilities managers are grappling with a lot. And that's why this conversation is critical, and it's a conversation that we have to continue to have both at the local, state, and national level, because we understand that we have a set of demands imposed upon us in this moment by this pandemic that extend even beyond the concerns, the like incredibly valid and important concerns and issues that we were working on before. Just for context, the state of Rhode Island in 2017 identified about $3 billion worth of deficiencies in our schools, of which there's about 500 million that was HVAC related. So that gives you a little bit of context at the state level. And we understand that this question of energy efficiency, as it's been posed here, is one that's inextricably tied to health and safety. So without further ado, I have some incredibly knowledgeable and intelligent people who will do much better justice to this topic than I will. So I will introduce those folks. Dr. Joseph Allen will be joining us from Harvard. John Balfe is joining us from the Northeast Energy Efficiency Partnership. And Lauren Hanna is one of the 2020 URI Energy Fellows. They will be presenting to us in that order. And I will start by introducing Dr. Joseph Allen. Dr. Joseph Allen is an associate professor at the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health and co-author of Healthy Buildings, How Indoor Spaces Drive Performances and Productivity. Dr. Allen has been a leading voice in the response to COVID-19. He's an expert member of the Lancet Commission for COVID-19 and has been advising CEOs across major sectors of the economy: healthcare, academia, finance, media, manufacturing, courts, prisons, shelters, and the arts. He's internationally renowned expert on the topic of healthy buildings, and his work has been featured widely in the popular press. And there's a long list of places where he's featured, but I think I'll pause there and allow Dr. Allen to join us and to share the great work that he's doing. The stage is yours. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for that really great, kind introduction, and thanks for the invitation to present here. I really want to focus on a topic we've been intensely focused on since May, and that's how do we return kids back to school safely in a larger context of exposure and risk. And I'll tie this into the energy conversation. I just got off the phone with 2 hours of calls, again, with more school districts that are looking for guidance here. So I think we're all experiencing the same thing. But I want to start at a high level here and really talk about what we're building or what's at stake, really. And I think very often when we think about risk or safe schools, we get reductionist. Particularly recently, we've been thinking about risk in the classroom. And that's very important, but there are massive risks with the kids out of school first and foremost. I think most people would recognize this. Virtual dropouts on the order of tens of thousands, big issues of food insecurity. Millions of kids rely on schools for meals. We wrote an op-ed today, published in USA Today, showing how there were even just in one short stretch in spring, 1 billion meals were missed by kids, 1 billion meals. There's physical activity impacts, socialization impacts. UNICEF said kids who are at home due to school closures at higher risk for abuse, neglect, exploitation, and violence. So we want to start with that frame first and foremost, and why it's an imperative we get kids back to school. Second, I think when we think about safer schools and safer buildings, very often the conversation is focused on kids, as it should be, but also we have to be thinking about the health and well-being of the adults who share that space with the kids. In terms of COVID-19, when it comes to this virus, we do get a benefit when it comes to kids. Benefit's the wrong word. Should say this virus hasn't spared us at all, except through a quirk. Kids are less likely to get this. They are less likely to die if they do get it, on the order of 10 to the minus 5 risk, 3 in 100,000 or so. The risks are much, much higher for those who are older. And it looks like they're less likely to transmit, and particularly the younger kids. So we get that benefit, but anytime we talk about the plans that we're going to put in place, we have to keep in mind that they're designed for both kids and adults. So then the question is, well, how do we open? And before we even get to the classroom, which is I think we're going to focus on here, the building, there's two conditions precedent. First, the when to open. You cannot open with high community spread. If you do this, there are going to be outbreaks. So first, we have to manage this. And from a societal standpoint, we need to prioritize getting schools open before other aspects of the economy. Schools should be the last things to close, first things, and should be the last to close. First things that we need to close are places that are high congregate settings, high risk, like bars and restaurants. So where I am in Massachusetts, we're doing the exact opposite. Release guidance with other faculty at Harvard, including the Center for Ethics, Harvard Global Health Institute, on these metrics that are available to determine when kids should be back in school. And by the way, everything I'm sharing is at my Harvard Healthy Buildings Program website. It's at schools.forhealth.org. So that's first condition precedent, the when to go back, low enough community spread. The second is, what do you do in the school? This is where this health energy question is coming into play right now. So what are the risk reduction strategies we need to reopen schools? Because it cannot be schools as usual when we go back. So my team put out a 60-page report on risk reduction strategies for reopening schools. This came out in June. And we've released additional guidance that I'll share in a second, built around these 5 areas that we're focusing on: healthy policies, healthy activities, healthy classrooms, healthy buildings, and healthy schedules. I won't go through all of them, other than to say this before I dive into healthy buildings in particular, is that there is no one strategy in and of itself that is sufficient to keep kids safe from any infectious disease. So it's a layered defense approach. If we layer enough of these defenses on top of each other, we can reduce risk. And before I get into the engineering controls related to the building, we have to think about the other controls that must be in place. Of course, universal masking, absolute must. Hand washing, physical distancing, but also as important, group distancing, keeping groups together, separated, so that if we do have a case in a class, it doesn't spread through the whole school and shut it down. I also think the most important recommendation we have in here is the need to build a culture of health, safety, and shared responsibility. The school building has a role to play. The administrators have a role to play. Teachers have a role to play. Parents have a role to play. Kids have a role to play. And the community has a role to play. This is about shared responsibility. When we think about healthy building strategies, this is where it gets interesting from the energy perspective and the health perspective. It's the age-old issue of energy, what I think is a false dichotomy of energy or health. We've had this false trade-off. Let's start first, I guess, 3 modes of transmission: close contact, fomite or contaminated surfaces, and then airborne transmission. So airborne transmission is absolutely happening. We've been calling it this since early February, despite CDC and World Health Organization being slow to recognize this. That's important to recognize it, because then that's where the healthy building strategies come into play. So to address airborne transmission, wearing a mask, first and foremost, is source control. That's key. Then you have options for what you can do. The way we like to prioritize and think about it first is to increase the outdoor air ventilation. Second, increase the level of filtration on recirculated air, MERV 13 or higher. Consider supplementing with portable air cleaners with HEPA filter. And fourth, maybe consider advanced air cleaning technologies. Now, what I'm seeing from many schools is that many are jumping to number 4 right off the bat. Let's throw in bipolar ionization. Let's do upper room UV, right? Without doing the basics first. And the basics are better ventilation, better filtration. And I'd say even step 0 is commission your systems. What are you actually dealing with your building? And talk about the most effective energy saving thing you could do. Just simply giving your building a checkup or a tune-up will go a long way, not just for energy efficiency, but also in terms of better indoor air quality. And so what I'm seeing right now, though, from many schools, in fact, the 2 I just spoke to, is that there's wide-scale confusion about what to do here. Do you use ASHRAE standards? Did ASHRAE set the ventilation standard for infectious disease? The answer is no. They just said increase outdoor air ventilation rate. But schools need targets. They did set a filtration rate, but without, they said MERV 13. But the big question has been, well, what's the appropriate ventilation rate for classrooms? What is it for the gymnasium? What is it for the cafeteria? So one of the things we've been doing is putting out some guidance. We spent a lot of time out in schools in the summer measuring ventilation rates, showing them how to do it. And then we developed a guide, a 5-step guide for how to check ventilation in classrooms. Some of the basics here. Well, I'll skip through the steps, but the basics, you go out and measure it, right? A bolometer, airflow capture hood, quantify how much fresh air, outdoor air is coming in. 2, you can use techniques using CO2 as a tracer gas. Here we use dry ice to build up the concentration. You measure decay curves or steady state CO2 concentration. All of that's fine, because then you can start to say, well, you know, in this example, this room gets 1.6 air changes from mechanical ventilation, 4 from windows. Open the doors, you get total 5.5 air change per hour. That's great. But what is every single school asking is, well, what's the target? You won't find it. CDC didn't publish a target. WHO hasn't published a target. ASHRAE hasn't published a target. So over the summer, a couple of faculty and I got together. We spent the weekend and we crafted part of our report or targets for air exchange rates in terms of air changes per hour, ACH, for classrooms, recommending between 4 and 6 air changes per hour based on these targets for ventilation plus filtration, right? And I think that's another area where schools are quite confused is it outdoor air ventilation rate? If I have higher ventilation, but it's filtered, does that count? What if it's a MERV 13? Do you count 100% of that fresh outdoor air? What about a portable air cleaner? How do you factor that in? It's all additive and it's actually quite straightforward, but there's a lot of confusion about how to do that. All right, I want to leave plenty of time for questions. So last slide here, I just want to say we have lots of guidance out there that talks about ventilation rates, how to select portable air cleaners, how to combine these factors and add them, and how to handle things like what to do with a MERV 13 filter and the ventilation rate in terms of your calculations for risk reduction strategies. And I'll close it on a maybe 2 thoughts from a big picture perspective, and that's this. First, we've been designing our ventilation standards for bare minimums. In fact, the ASHRAE standard is the standard for acceptable indoor air quality. I think we need to be past the era of acceptable indoor air quality. Objectively, it has not been acceptable. We have been in the sick building era since the 70s when we started tightening up our energy code in response to the global energy crisis. So acceptable is no longer acceptable. Second, even these minimums are not being met. Of course, we are clearly underinvesting in school infrastructure. On most schools, on average, meet half of the ASHRAE minimum standard when you actually go out and measure. I think a lot of this has to do with our prioritization or maybe the lack of understanding that the school building is actually influencing health. Secretary of Education Betsy DeVos 2 years ago on 60 Minutes said we need to invest in students, not school buildings. Absolutely, we need to invest in students, but there's a monster disconnect when you say not in school buildings. An investment in the school building is an investment in the students and teachers in there. So thank you for inviting me, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thanks.
Wow, thank you, Dr. Allen. I will allow a moment while people type in their questions, and maybe I will prompt you. I could not help but nod all the way through. I feel like Dr. Allen is my new best colleague. So one of the things that jumped out at me and I'd like to start with and maybe talk a little bit about is this question that you bring up about the confusions at schools. And this is something that we have firsthand knowledge at the Department of Education. There's a lot of confusion, conflicting messages. And you bring up this question of step 0, which you call, you know, just the basic kind of commissioning, and I think it actually may be worth even just talking a little bit about what commissioning is. But it's one of the things that I think we have been talking about with our constituents and districts, is that essentially this is work that has to be done, and it has to be done by professionals that are trained to know and understand this, because as good as a playbook might be, it still requires a professional. So that's a little bit of a question, but maybe it's more of a statement. But I'd like to just hear a little bit more about that in terms of how you imagine that happens and how you're seeing it happen with those districts that you're working with or companies that you're working with in terms of the actual kind of measurement and commissioning.
Yeah, it's one of the most important steps. And like I said, I've done these, I've done a career for doing forensic investigations of sick buildings, including schools. And what you find very often in schools, right, is that the buildings aren't maintained, the unit ventilators aren't maintained. And so when you get into a crisis like this, and we have to say, well, we need to have some percent outdoor air or air change per hour, and it's the first time people are actually looking at the system and saying, wow, we're not even sure what it can do. When's the last time a filter was changed? I was at some schools, we opened up the unit ventilators, the fans installed backwards. Even before that, the windows don't open, right? So before even commissioning the system, it's like the real basics here, and it speaks to the ongoing maintenance needs of schools and the funding that's needed to support that. But it's really quite important too from a health standpoint and also from the energy standpoint. If you look at work out of Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, for example, saying there's about 15 to 20% energy savings in buildings if you just commission your systems, if you're just commissioning your systems. And when you do that, we know that buildings with commissioned systems actually perform better in terms of objectively measured indoor air quality performance. So that simple step, that's step zero, it's the tune-up, right? It's the checkup for your car, it's the oil change. Is the system working as it's designed? Better indoor air quality, better energy savings. Then in an event like this, you're able to say, well, you know what? Now we can tweak our systems. We can crank them up a bit. And what we found for schools is that this summer is the first time many had the opportunity where they had to go in and start kicking the tires on their systems, and they're realizing, wow, we didn't realize how the damper was closed, or that we couldn't handle a better grade filter. So the commissioning is really important, and especially if you think about the energy health dichotomy here, or this false trade-off, because let's say, the higher ventilation rates comes with an energy penalty. Well, if we think holistically about energy, I'm talking within the building, let alone what we need to do with the grid. If you save that energy from a commissioning basis, some of that energy savings can be used to improve indoor air quality. In fact, the process of commissioning improves indoor air quality. So you can actually have energy savings with health. I just sometimes think we think in narrow buckets about how to pull off both. And in my opinion, we can't have energy efficiency at the expense of the health and well-being of people inside of a building.
Amen. Thank you. It looks like I have at least a question, maybe two. I guess let me start with this. Where is the best place for school administrators to get up-to-date information on how best to approach this issue?
Well, there's limited. So this will sound, just I'm going to point to our work. I think it's quite good. I think this 60-page risk reduction report is good. The guidance on how to assess ventilation rates is good. You're interested in portable air cleaners, which is a really simple plug-and-play strategy that can help you when you're in a jam and maybe you don't have the time to fix your systems. We have a technical white paper on the science behind air cleaners, and then we built a simple tool for how to determine which air cleaner should go in the classroom. So I think that's pretty good guidance out there in terms of what can be done right now, longer-term strategies, and it's all evidence-based. So I'll point to our work. I think it's a lot of schools have been using it and using it effectively.
I have a question about what parents should ask, and they're asking what 20 questions, but we might just limit it to a few. But what 20 questions should all parents ask before sending their kids back to school?
Well, so someone was paying close attention, and that's really good. So in that last set of guidance, one of the things we produced over the summer in response to getting many of these questions was an FAQ, frequently asked questions, or really questions that every parent should ask, and giving them guidance, because we found that people have a hard time even formulating or seeing what should they be asking of their school. And it's everything I talked about, just in different language. What are the number of cases? Are the cases in the area low enough for schools to reopen? That when to open piece. What are the requirements on universal masking? This is a must, and I don't think people get this. I'll just do a sidebar here quick. Even masks that are not perfectly efficient, like a 70% efficient mask, the fact that it's universal masking and it has to go through 2 masks gives you double protection. So for example, if 100 particles get released through a 70% efficient mask, 30 make it into space. Some will be diluted out through ventilation, some will be captured in filters. But let's say all 30 hit the next mask. Well, another 21 are removed, there's 9 left. The combined effect of the mask is 90%, over 90%. So that's pretty good, and this is the power of universal masking. Anyway, I don't want to go through all 20, but we do ask these same questions. You should be asking, what are the outdoor air supply rates? Are you meeting these target air changes per hour? Or do you have MERV 13 filters on your air handler? What about the use of portable air cleaners? So it's meant to simplify this and give people just short answers for what they should be looking for from their administrators, if parents or teachers or anybody else has questions about the school.
All right, we have a couple other questions coming in. On the topic of air quality, how are college buildings doing compared to high school and middle schools?
Well, I think you have some advantages depending on the school, of course, the university, but K through 12 schools, right? A lot of that's going to be mechanical ventilation. A lot of the, well, this is not universal, so this is a big generalization. It's going to depend on the vintage of the building, the types of mechanical systems, of course. But I'd say universities seem to have more resources, and they typically have paid closer attention to their facilities and management. So they're starting from a different place, right? They have resources and they've been maintaining them for the most part. Universities still have plenty of challenges. Here, it's different. K through 12 school, people leave. What do you do in a dormitory? 2 people on top of each other, 4 people in a quad. You know, what do you actually do? In many buildings, for example, I'm at Harvard, we have a lot of buildings, particularly over the summer, that are naturally ventilated only. And so you're relying on opening windows to drive some of this, this ventilation rate. So universities have plenty of problems, but they have resources to meet some of these challenges.
So I'm going to fold one of the other questions into this one, which is somebody asks about a building built in the 1930s with one old whole building fan. So, you know, I think getting to that point that you were just making about some of the buildings that you can only open windows, what types of recommendations or what type of work are you seeing happen in those types of buildings?
Yeah, so it really depends on the building, but in that kind of system, right, you're relying on that central fan to create essentially a vacuum in there, a chimney, right, and you're pulling in there, and it's driving a pressure differential so that you're bringing some air through the windows. Or, you know, in many of the older buildings, you get an advantage that they're leakier, so not good for energy efficiency, but they're breathing more. We found in many of those buildings, even opening the windows just a couple inches, especially if it has that central system, right, the central fan, you can get air changes that are up over 10 air changes per hour, just from windows open, doors open, create that cross breeze. If you can't get that, this is where, especially in a naturally ventilated building, we think the portable air cleaner with the HEPA filter is a good strategy. They're relatively affordable. If you size it right for the room, you can get those 4, 5, or 6 air changes per hour if you pick a device that has a high enough clean air delivery rate. A good rule of thumb is you're looking for a CADR, clean air delivery rate, of about 300 for every 500 square feet. If you do that, that's about 4.5 air changes per hour, depending on your ceiling height. So that's a simple plug-and-play solution, right? Where if you're really in a jam and we're short on time, you want to get kids back, recognizing again the big picture problem of the very severe consequences of having kids out of school, and some school systems facing the prospect of kids being out of school for an entire year. What do we need to do to get them back? Well, that's a simple plug-and-play strategy that can solve, in the short term, many problems or deficiencies, I should say, in the current ventilation or filtration sets that many schools are dealing with.
Thank you. I'm going to actually fold. I'm going to keep the questions are actually kind of folding into each other very nicely. Somebody asked about a kind of clarification or explanation about how the air change units are calculated and what kind of variables are they taking into account?
Yeah, it's a really good question. If you think about the ventilation standard from ASHRAE, You calculate ventilation rates for classroom any space with two factors, really a per area ventilation rate and a per person ventilation rate. And then you combine those, or you can use those to come up with how many CFM, cubic feet per minute, are needed. And a lot of times this is wrapped up into a cubic feet per minute per person. So that's perfectly fine to do that approach, except you want to go above the minimums that ASHRAE calculates. We decided to turn that into an air change per hour calculation based on default occupancy assumptions for several reasons. One, if you have high air changes per hour, the residence time of any airborne particles can be decreased, regardless of who's in the room. If you have 5 people in there, you still want to clear out the air quickly. If you have 10 people, you want to clear it out quickly. So some people have rightly, I think fairly, tried to scale the occupant density, and you can use that kind of sliding scale that ASHRAE uses. For COVID-19, we like the air change per hour metric. It simplifies things in the classroom. It's really intuitive how many air changes you're getting. And at the same time, it's designed for default occupancies so that if you do go to fewer students, our metric is conservative in the sense that it's more health protective. Any fewer students you have there beyond that goes lower than the default occupant densities of 25 students per 1,000 square feet is actually okay. And this way it accounts for if a classroom has 5 extra kids come in, a teacher comes in or out, it's always erring on the side of caution. So that's some of the logic behind how we derive this. If you're interested in the derivation, on our website, we have a link to the calculator for portable air cleaners. There's a README tab that explains the math and includes the ASHRAE standard, and it describes all the assumptions we made and how we got to those air change per hour calculations.
I have a feeling I'm going to be visiting your website. The next question regards funding, and I have a piece to answer here, but have you seen any legislative action on the state or federal level to address the urgent funding need? I am aware of RASA on the federal level and CAAB 841, question mark. Any thoughts on these efforts other than that we need to see move forward to address funding? So I'll just kind of answer at the state level because it's something that actually the School Building Authority at the Department of Education just announced last week, funding specifically for COVID-related projects. Every district got an allocation based on kind of a formula derived from COVID rates in each of the communities and a kind of population rate in each of the communities. The total pool of money was about $4 million. There's a minimum award of about $10,000 for single school districts or charter schools. And I believe the highest was Providence at $1.4 million. The kind of guidance on that was pretty broad, allowing districts to do all kinds of work. In a place like Providence, where you have 1.4 million, you could do a significant HVAC type project in one or maybe more schools. For some of the smaller amounts, there's latitude for districts to decide how they use it, including filtration and other strategies. So that's just been released, and districts are already taking advantage of that. That's at the state level here in Rhode Island.
Yeah, that's a great answer. I love it. Maybe I'll not talking about the actual funding, but I think it's important to talk about that these benefits that we're talking about extend beyond COVID-19, right? So there are some things that'll go away. Plexiglass will go away. It should go away, right? The markings on the floor, where to stand, right? That's gone. But these improvements to ventilation should go well beyond COVID-19. And we have another report we wrote a couple of years ago called Schools for Health, over 200 studies, scientific studies showing the benefits to student health, student thinking, and student performance, including the benefits from higher ventilation rates, better air quality, better thermal conditions in the space. So while this might seem like a short-term investment, I think you agree with me. These are really investments that are help for COVID-19, but also help for the duration here. So these are really wise investments.
Absolutely. And I guess more broadly, at the state level, the General Assembly has not met and passed a budget, and there's obviously we're kind of at a lock at the federal level. Although I know that some of our legislative leaders at the federal level. Jack Reed primarily has been working on a school infrastructure bill for a long time. So, who knows what happens in this election cycle and looking ahead, but that's something to keep an eye on. I have another question regarding opening classroom doors. Aren't we getting into possible fire code issues?
So I'm not a fire code expert. I don't know about that. I don't, well, I shouldn't speculate on it. I don't know. I don't think that's an issue though.
Yeah, and these are that's a good question, and to the person asking this, when we work with districts at the state level, our recommendation is to work closely both with their fire officials on this work, but also with the safety officials in their communities. There are obviously both fire code issues that can emerge from this type of work, but also security concerns, right? Like the kind of issue of, for the most part, we've been instructing teachers to close their classrooms. And so there are issues that come up with this, and this should be coordinated with every community's safety plan anyway. So that's an ongoing conversation that we encourage all of our districts to undertake. So that seems like it might be the last question. And I'm just trying to scan. Yeah, I think I got them all. Thank you, Dr. Allen. I feel like I have learned a great deal tonight, and I have some research to do myself. So thank you so much for your time. Up next, I'd like to introduce John Balfe. It is a great pleasure to introduce John. I have been working with John and NEEP for a long time now. And I'd like to share that NEEP actually helped Rhode Island come up with the school construction regulations back in 2006, 2007. And with those school construction regulations came the NEEP's guidance, which is a LEED equivalent green building guidance, which really we use to kind of hang our hat on and do really impactful work in all of our schools across the state. This is not just an energy efficiency guidance. This really digs deep into health and safety. So that is my introduction of John, but I will share that John works with the Buildings and Community Solutions team at NEEP to help drive energy efficiency in new and retrofitted schools and public buildings throughout the region. He works with various industry stakeholders, myself included, to advance public policy with high-performance building standards in the region, including facilitation of information exchange and knowledge transfer between states and programs. John, welcome, and take it away.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Manuel. Appreciate that kind intro. Dr. Allen, discussed the critically important topic that's happening right now related to schools in the pandemic. And, this is where all of our attention deserves to be focused at this time. My presentation is going to focus a little bit less on responding to the pandemic right now. But as Dr. Allen kind of got into at the end there, I'm talking about future efforts that are going to support the health and the well-being of building occupants really over the long term here. So my intention with this presentation is to help raise awareness of the multiple benefits that a high performance or a zero energy school can deliver to your community. I want to share several examples of where this is already happening and how you can learn from some of these models. And then lastly, I want to give you guys a couple of strategies and resources that you can take back to your own communities if you're looking to get involved with your local school building projects. So before I dive in too deep, just wanted to provide a little bit more information about who NEEP is. We're a regional nonprofit organization that's committed to improving energy efficiency in the building sector. We work throughout the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic states and have done a lot of work in Rhode Island over the years. And I'm glad to be working with a lot of the partners that are on the call here today. one of the primary areas that I work within are schools. So again, before diving too deep into this discussion, I wanted to just kind of define what I mean when I'm saying these two terms, high performance and zero energy, which I will undoubtedly say over and over again here today. High performance schools, what I really mean by this are educational facilities that are built to support three main pillars: the health of occupants, the productivity of occupants, and environmental stewardship or benefits. And from our perspective, energy really plays a critical role in all three of these areas and can be used to support each of these different areas. Now, when I say a zero energy school, it's really incorporating all three of these pillars as well, but taking that energy component of the building to that next level. So to define a zero energy school, simply put, it's a building that produces as much energy on site as it'll consume over the course of a year. So it's a highly energy efficient building paired with renewable energy on site. Typically we see solar that helps offset the energy consumption of the building over a course of a year. So, I think we've touched on a few of the components of the physical school building and why it's so important to focus on the design and the operations of these facilities. But just to add a couple of key areas that I don't think we always think about, in addition to the health and productivity of these buildings. But a community really is centered around its schools. This may be the reason that a family moves to a city or town, or in times of extreme weather events, a school may become a shelter for its community members. So there's that resiliency component as well. We all know that schools are used for much more than learning, whether it's community events, places for polling and voting. I think all of these different components really speak to the critical need of designing and building our schools carefully. I went to an elementary school in a pretty old, rundown building, badly in need of upgrades. And I remember rooms being dark and drafty and leaky ceilings. I remember buckets in hallways at times. So this environment, it doesn't lend itself to healthy or productive outcomes for students. It does not lend itself to operational savings for communities. But on the flip side of a building like that, you have these bright and inviting high performance or zero energy schools that all students should have access to. A couple of years ago, I participated in an event up in New Hampshire, and a teacher was telling me all about the impact that their new high performance facility has had on its students. And he noted that students were coming to school much more excited, much more engaged compared to their old facilities. And that same district actually saw a significant decrease in absenteeism after opening up their new high performance facility. So I think it's really stories like this that show the importance of building healthy, energy efficient learning environments. So if your community is looking to build a new school or make upgrades to an existing facility, renovate an existing facility, or simply just improve the operations and the maintenance procedures within the existing facilities, you should really be ensuring that that project meets a standard for high performance. And Manuel talked about this a little bit, but one of those standards that has been widely used in Rhode Island and other places across the country is called Northeast CHIPS. So whether this project might be required through state regulations to follow the standard, or whether a community wants to follow the standard on a voluntary basis, I think there's some key elements that stakeholders should really try to understand to make this a comprehensive project and to ensure that the health and the productivity of building occupants are really kept in mind throughout each stage of the design and construction and operations of these buildings. So I wanted to outline a few of these different sections or the categories that come out of Northeast CHIPS, give you kind of an idea of the different sections that a project will touch on during the construction and the design. So just to highlight a few of these different areas and really give you a better sense of how they actually play out in the real world, the integrated design process that is shown here on your screen, that really means engaging building occupants, the facility directors, the teachers, other staff members, making sure that they're engaged and trained to operate the building systems appropriately. A school building, if they're designing to be energy efficient, might have a lot of new new systems, new controls. So ensuring that the building operator knows how to appropriately work these systems is critically important to the ongoing success. Next up here is the indoor environmental quality section. So this section really touches on all of those aspects of indoor air quality, appropriate acoustical levels, things that really support, thermal comfort, things that support the health and the productivity of building occupants. And just the last one I'll touch on here is the energy and water section. Guidance within this section ensures that operating costs over the lifespan of the building are reduced and that negative impacts on the environment are also reduced by focusing on reducing energy consumption and water consumption, installing energy efficient appliances and energy efficient HVAC systems, lighting, all of those different areas. So again, this is just to give you a sense of the holistic approach that we all should be taking to the design and construction of our school buildings and the different areas that we need to touch on in order to have these successful outcomes that we're talking about here today. So Rhode Island is home to many great examples of the standards being implemented and these practices being implemented in the real world. One of the great projects in Rhode Island is the East Bay Met School located in Newport. So this facility was actually the first zero energy designed public school within the NEEP region. We have a lot more information on this project on our website, a case study, and I think there's a few different areas where you can find information on this school. But it's an exciting project that incorporates all those different elements that I talked about on my previous slide and incorporates all these great design features that you can see on the screen here, from daylighting to LED lighting controls, and then to a unique one that talks about using the school as a teaching tool. So if we are designing these buildings to be very energy efficient, to be modern, and to be models, we should be teaching our students about how the design features that went into this facility. So that really speaks to the school as a teaching tool type of model. We can integrate those things into our curriculums and really showcase and try to build that next generation of architects and engineers and facility operators that are interested in high performance and zero energy buildings. So like I said, more info on this project can be found on the NEEP website if you're interested in taking a look at that. One of the classic, the most probably common questions that I get when I'm doing a discussion about zero energy or high performance buildings is, what is the cost associated with building a building to a higher standard? And I wish that there was a straightforward, definitive answer that I could give you on this topic. But as you might expect, the cost of these buildings, depends a lot on many factors. But I think there's a growing amount of data out there that shows that these buildings don't need to cost more than your typical kind of conventional buildings that are done out there. And in fact, a lot of the components of what we think of high performance or a better building are actually kind of becoming commonplace in a lot of the designs that architects are putting out there today. So that's a great thing to see that these are the costs are going down, to the upfront costs of these buildings are going down, and then of course over time these operational costs, if you're implementing energy efficiency features, of course over the lifespan of the building are going down as well. So one of the keys that I like to share with folks that are looking to build a zero energy school, one of the keys to managing costs on a project like this is ensuring the buy-in from your design team early on in the process. There's a lot of great info out there on the NEEP website, as well as one of our partners, the National Renewable Energy Lab. They've come out with some great questions and kind of like what Dr. Allen was talking about, FAQs to run by your design teams to make sure that they're bought into this process, and to ensure that they're able to deliver a project that meets your goals, whether that's high performance or zero energy, at a cost that is acceptable to you. And again, I think getting this ingrained in the conversation early on, so that energy and health can be discussed really at every point of the project, I think is critically important to the success here. So I just wanted to share one other example of the kind of around this cost discussion. I hate to share an example outside of Rhode Island because I know there's so many good projects there, but here's one from Massachusetts that really shows that a highly energy efficient building is possible at or below cost of an average building. So as you can see on the screen here, this project out of Brookline, Mass, achieved an EUI, which is a metric for measuring energy consumption on a per square foot basis over the course of a year. The EUI here is a 26, which is quite good and a good target for a lot of folks. We're seeing projects even under that number, but 26 is a good EUI. And as you can see here, the cost was below the average for other Mass School Building Authority projects. So again, there's a lot of data out there, and on one of my last slides, I'll link to more information on this discussion about the costs of these types of projects. So, if you're looking to get involved at the local level within your community, this is information you can kind of bring forward to folks and share that others have been able to do this at cost, and it need not to be a deterrent for a project. So I really wanted to leave folks with just an understanding of what they can do to get involved with projects at the local level. And again, like I said, if your community is building a new construction project or simply looking to improve the operations of an existing facility, anyone on this phone here, anyone on this call here today can be that local level champion. All it takes is one kind of squeaky wheel to keep coming back and driving forward this process. And when you're equipped with some of the knowledge and the resources that you can bring forward to a group like a school building committee, that can go a long way. So I definitely encourage folks to be that person that is that local level energy champion, advocating for a holistic approach and designing to a standard like Northeast CHIPS. I think will really help get at a lot of the benefits that we're looking to get out of buildings. So, not just focusing singularly on energy or water or, any of the components that go into a building, really thinking about it broadly and holistically, and thinking about the ongoing operations of that facility is critically important. Explore zero energy as a possibility for your project. Bring it up with your architect and design team, see what they think is possible. You can always push them along. And, I think it's important to remember that communities are hiring these folks for a service, and it's okay to, bring this up in conversations and bring it up early on. There's a lot of help out there. And that's kind of the last thing I'll leave folks with. There's a lot of assistance from different groups out there to give presentations to school building committees or share data or, do tours of other existing facilities that really can, help change the minds of other folks that might not be set on, investing in a zero energy project. So, one of the things that NEEP is able to do is to work with the community and do a little bit more of kind of a deeper dive into any of these areas, or present on the Northeast CHIPS criteria, and try to work with folks to move projects forward at the local level. And I touched on a few different resources, over the course of all these slides here, but I wanted to leave folks with some links directly to a lot of the good information that's out there. And I will, just also advocate for some of the great resources that are on the Schools for Health that Dr. Allen mentioned. Schools for Health resource. It's a great report that I cite quite frequently when working with communities. So definitely encourage folks to go check that out. And, on top of that, NEEP has a lot of information on energy efficiency related products and programs that you might find of interest, beyond just this discussion here about schools. So if you have any questions, looking for anything specifically, I'd be happy to, talk with you a bit more directly. Like I said, that's, part of what we do. So I think that is my last slide. Yeah, I've got time for some questions, and I'll just throw up this as my contact information if folks are looking to reach out and dive deeper into any of those topics that I discussed. That's all.
Thank you, John. I will allow a moment for folks to type in questions, and maybe while we wait, I want to go, or not go to the slide, but talk a little bit about that slide around costs, because it's definitely something that we hear a lot. And again, for folks kind of listening in Rhode Island, the NECHIPS is required for construction in school buildings above 500,000. So, but even then, we get a fair amount of resistance, and it comes from varying bodies. I mean, sometimes it's an architect, sometimes it's a construction company. But the interesting thing is that in some ways, I don't think it's a valid question, and because we can't afford not to, right? Like I'll just offer one example, but John, I'm sure you can offer others, and I kind of want to kind of talk about this a little bit. You know, the question of acoustics in classrooms is not addressed anywhere else in our school construction regulation or anywhere else in regulation or statute. So you could have a bulldozer or you know, something incredibly noisy like a unit ventilator in a classroom, and there's no guidance on that. And yet for a high performance learning environment, it has to be a quiet space where you can hear what you're trying to learn. So, you know, it does not seem like much of an option. And I'm sure you can share other examples of things like that, where it just is what we should be doing and what we should be striving for. And I think Dr. Allen kind of alluded to this as well. John, I think that's a little bit more of a prompt than a question, but I'm just curious about your thoughts about this, since we're having these conversations out there.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think there's a lot of you know, best practices now around acoustics and things, and you know, one of the requirements within Northeast CHIPS is around testing and making sure that you know, noise levels in classrooms is appropriate, and you know, there are standards out there for measuring that. So I think you know, as much as we can standardize that, and you know, I think it's an area that a lot of folks just don't necessarily consider when they're talking about, you know, HVAC equipment design. It's not something that people outside of our bubble are really thinking about, but it is, you know, hugely important. And you know, Dr. Allen, I'm sure, has a lot of I know there's a lot of good information on, you know, acoustic levels and the importance of that within school buildings. So I think you know, as much as we can equip the decision makers and equip you know, those squeaky wheels, those interested stakeholders with that information, that will hopefully start to change the minds of folks. And like you said, it's stuff that we cannot afford to do. You know, it has to be done. So that's part of my role, is trying to get that information in the hands of the folks that need it.
Yeah, and I think the critical thing to know is that it's all about considering this holistically, and again, the decision about ventilation is connected to this decision about acoustics, is connected to a whole other set of decisions. I think worth noting that the NECHIPS guidance provides decision makers, and I think you mentioned this, with a lot of the kind of information that they need. I would say that it tends towards the kind of very detailed, and its audience is the folks who are designing. But if somebody does want to say, hey, what are we doing about this? This is the place to push on, because a lot of the guidance regarding many of the things that we're talking about here, including ventilation rates, filtration rates, all of those things are actually specified within the NECHIPS. And again, that applies to all Rhode Island schools. I'm looking at the questions, and I have maybe a question, maybe more a comment. I think I connected a lot with what John was saying. I was on a building design committee in which I pushed for more sustainable development. Shortly after the building was finished, it was awarded Gold LEED certification. So success story, I hope. I think the other kind of tricky thing with that or is to kind of follow that during the lifetime of the building. I think, John, maybe you can talk a little bit about kind of operations over the life of the building.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, that's great. I'm happy to hear that, you know, that person kind of successfully pushed for a project. That's what we need a lot more of, I think, in our local communities, and building to that standard is that great first step. But like you said, Manuel, I think it's important that we're incorporating the ongoing operations in the commissioning or recommissioning of buildings on an ongoing basis. Those are critical components to make sure that our buildings that are designed to these great standards are actually operating to them over the course of the lifespan of that building. So there are a lot of good resources out there on that too, kind of the operational side. NEEP has an operations and maintenance guide, some low to no cost measures that folks can be taking, or insights into how to operate more of these high performance facilities. So I think that's another area that we need to be focusing on beyond just the design, but that ensuring those ongoing operations.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I can, I'll connect this a little bit to something that Dr. Allen was talking about earlier about how much of what needs to be done has to do with a kind of maintenance component, right? He was talking about systems where once you went and looked, the filter hadn't been changed or the fan was in the wrong way, and that's certainly something that I can attest to. And I think I will say that we've certainly seen a kind of wide array of kind of capacity at districts to kind of undertake this work, right? And I think that's a critical thing to mention, is that the work that we're talking about here, that you're mentioning, John, and that Dr. Allen is mentioning, is not work that a kind of custodian would necessarily do, right? This is work that is essentially a mechanical engineer or a repairman, right? And or trained staff that works for the district, but not every district has that. So part of this is also a question of the districts having the capacity to try to tackle this. Which again, in kind of constrained budget like we're suffering from right now, is no easy task.
Yeah, for sure. One of the areas that NEEP has been working and engaged on, especially recently with the U.S. Department of Energy, is on this kind of workforce development discussion, and trying to make sure that local level building operators are trained and certified, with specific credentials so that they can operate these facilities. So it's a huge need, really, across the country, industry wide, with buildings that I think a lot of people are taking a look at. And the funding component of this is huge for schools, but I think there is a push to ensure that next generation of building operators really is equipped with that knowledge. And another area that we've been engaged on, and I'm happy to try to share resources with folks if interested.
Thank you, John. So I think we will transition now. So thank you so much for your presentation. And up next, I am pleased to introduce Lauren Hanna. Lauren is a 2020 URI Energy Fellow, working alongside her mentor, Jerry Drummond of National Grid, and Kathy Stanley of Energy Advocates, to promote energy efficiency in Rhode Island school buildings. Lauren earned her Master's of Environmental Science and Management in 2020 from URI. Congratulations, Lauren.
Thank you. So I just want to thank Kate and Kaylin for asking me to be a part of this conversation, first and foremost. As you mentioned, I've been working with Jerry Drummond from National Grid this past year, and the majority of my job has entailed working with municipalities to ensure that they are provided the necessary data and energy tracking to allow them to make appropriate decisions. I would like to walk through the process from start to finish of how school energy audit is completed. So essentially it comes at the request of the facility manager and those in the district responsible for budgeting energy spending. Business managers will notice a trend of high energy bills, and at the discretion of the district, a form is submitted through the Office of Energy Resources website requesting an energy assessment. This is an example of what the form looks like. When this is completed, an email is typically sent to OER as well as Jerry Drummond, who is one of National Grid's lead state and municipality focused sales reps. From there, National Grid schedules an audit with the customer. The next step in this process is having a tech rep perform an analysis based on 3 years of energy data on a square foot basis, allowing them to look at any abnormalities. This is known as benchmarking by most. It is important to note here that the goal we're aiming for to reach in Rhode Island is about 50 MBTUs per square foot. Something interesting to note is that an elementary school usually uses about 15% less energy than a middle school or a high school, and that's because of its hours of operation. If you think about it, middle schools and high schools tend to have more after-school programs, and something as simple as that can have a big impact. Here is an example of a recent benchmark study completed in a town for Rhode Island. I won't disclose who it is, but in my previous slide, as I mentioned, the goal MBTU per square foot is 50. But as you can see, this particular school district has an average of 75.51, with the highest location being 87.33. The solution for this particular school was to replace its boiler, and that's under construction currently. And then by doing that, it allows us to focus on the other schools that are problems. And so with that initial assessment completed, an on-site visit is conducted where the common areas such as the auditorium, the cafeteria, the gym, a standard classroom size, as well as the boiler rooms are inspected. And with a benchmarking study underway, it's important to also look at common factors that I have listed here that will have an impact on building and completed. An initial roadmap is created to explain to the customers or the districts in this case what their options are and how they can loosely expect these improvements to increase their efficiency. Based on a 5-year capital plan with the Department of Education, and outlines simplifying what can be done over the next 5 years, allows the district to identify a course of action, and that allows them to set aside an estimated sum for their budget. The listed items here are in order of most effective when looking at energy savings typically. In a few slides, I'm going to show an example of how effective LEDs have proven to be in decreasing electric consumption. So if a district decides to move forward with any given actionable item, contractors will come in at no cost or obligation and provide a lighting or heating audit to provide a firm cost, utility incentives, as well as estimated energy savings. And this is what we refer to as an executable contract, where the customers will decide if they want to move forward with that contractor based on the quote and timeline provided. With this executable contract in hand, National Grid can then sign off on a commitment letter stating that National Grid can allocate a certain sum of money towards that project. If it's necessary for lack of funding, an OBR or what's called the on-bill repayment can be offered, and that will fund the remaining net cost of the project. And that's typically added on to each bill until the project is fully paid. In order to consider the project and the contract complete, National Grid does what's called a post-inspection. And this is simply sending that tech rep back to the location to ensure that the contract was completed. They might perform some functionality tests, and then a customer provides a signature agreeing that all has been completed. So after about 2 years, typically a follow-up analysis is done. Something to note, though, is that these are usually requested because the customer doesn't see any dollar savings. So in this particular instance, dollars are represented here in the bottom line chart. This usually goes up as time goes on, though, because the cost of electricity goes up. So again, this particular example is of a school in Warwick that was retrofitted with LEDs both inside and outside. And if you look closely at the red line, that represents 2019, and the dark blue line is 2020. It does drop off at the end, but that was simply because of COVID. And that's when the analysis date was cut off. But we are able to use this to show the customer that their kilowatt per hour usage did in fact decrease, meaning in essence that if they were to not complete this LED retrofit, their costs would be more than they are currently shown. So everybody's talking about it, so it wouldn't be good for me to ignore it, but with COVID, the recommendations basically are to increase airflow and run more fans for longer amounts of time. And it's quite obvious that COVID is going to negatively impact the schools that we are doing these enhancements for, and it's going to change the energy efficiency goals. It is safe to say that we haven't begun to even see the true fallout, and we won't until winter is over. Assuming that schools stay open all winter, these are estimates provided by Jerry Drummond himself as to how we can expect the consumptions to trend. And from what I've seen personally in schools, the costs of heating alone are going to be astronomical. Something that a lot of people don't think about is with the windows open and increased circulation, we run a higher risk of pipes freezing. So we do need to make sure that heating is where it should be. Process to improving schools and their energy efficiency. Unfortunately, though, this is a historic year that's going to have unprecedented impacts on the changes we have been making over the past 2 years, which is unfortunate, but we will bounce back eventually. And thank you. That's all I have prepared today. But if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out.
Thank you, Lauren. We have a question right off the bat. Are there incentives for lighting designers to provide healthy design solutions that include quality daylight?
So I can't speak too much as I'm just an intern, unfortunately, but National Grid does provide incentives, and they will help you find things. And then I also know that there are federal incentives as well.
Yeah, and I do believe that in the past, National Grid has offered the lighting incentives have been to kind of transition over to LEDs. I don't know what they're currently offering, but we've definitely seen a kind of big wave of transitioning over to LED.
Right, and then just to add on to that, they're also doing a lot of retrofits with LED timers, and then I believe what they're calling they're dimmers. So essentially, when it's brightest, the lights will automatically dim slightly, and that helps keep costs down and the environment right.
Yeah, and you know, just to tie this back to the question of kind of holistic learning environments, we certainly want lighting designers to be involved. So actually one of the NECHIP's requirements is for lighting designers to be involved in especially in learning environments, so classrooms. We want to make sure that we're designing to kind of minimize glare, but also we encourage daylight harvesting. So as Lauren was saying, the ability to be able to kind of dim lights according to the available daylight. One of the things I want to kind of point out regarding the kind of process that Lauren outlined is that she did mention that it kind of dovetails into the work that we do at the School Building Authority. And that's a kind of critical element for many districts. They want to kind of fold this into their 5-year capital improvement plan, and also make whatever the National Grid is not paying, or whatever they're not getting incentives for, eligible for state aid. So we do encourage districts to work with National Grid to take advantage of all the possible incentives, and then to fold the projects into their necessity of school construction, which is our process for ensuring state eligibility. So I wanted to throw out there. The other thing that is critical, and I think Lauren kind of alluded to, is that that these solutions also have to kind of work as part of the kind of big picture of the facility. So when they do come in and include these projects, we're asking to make sure that the project is integrated to the kind of vision for the facility as a whole, to make sure that whatever we are investing in these facilities, whether it's in lighting or HVAC, is aligned with the vision that the district has for their schools, which obviously is critically important. Are there any other questions? I have another kind of observation, sorry, Lauren, maybe you can speak to this. One of the things that we have noticed is that there's a kind of challenge with schools that, and this question of kind of energy savings, with schools that don't currently have ventilation and are adding ventilation. And so the question of kind of energy savings is a tough one in these scenarios, because it's going to be really hard for you to kind of retrofit an entire system, add ventilation, and still achieve savings. In some ways, those old buildings that had no ventilation are incredibly efficient because they were not, and again, it's not something that we're advocating for. We're actually advocating to have ventilation in these classrooms. I wonder how much that's something that you encounter in the work that you're doing.
School that has a really high MBTU, they currently do not have, their high school, I believe, has almost no ventilation. And so their solution is to stick fans in the windows and pull the air out while also pulling fresh air in. But again, you can look at some energy savings. You cannot retrofit, obviously, the ventilation for it now, but we're looking at saving costs with adding things like boilers, and maybe down the road, different updates can be made.
Yeah, and that's where I would encourage, I mean, and this is when we come in and talk to districts, because if you are changing a boiler and taking advantage of this incentive, we might still have you look at what it would look like to add ventilation to these facilities. In our minds, the investment that you're going to make in this facility, we don't do these very often, right? Like, in big investments in our school facilities happen every 15, 20 years. And so when we are doing this, we want to make sure that we're taking a look at these facilities holistically, and that we're addressing these issues and critical issues like, do we have ventilation in a classroom? Or these are things that we want to try to address as we're doing the work in the facilities. You had mentioned, and you may have ended with this slide, but you had mentioned that the best point of contact for incentives and whatnot would be? I
would say Jerry Drummond. I can provide his email and have maybe it out.
Yeah, maybe it would be a good thing to put in the chat, or so that folks that might be interested, especially if we have partners from our school districts in attendance, they might be interested in reaching out. We certainly encourage that. Well, it appears that we can transition. So Lauren was our last official speaker, but now I get to introduce you to an old friend of mine, Karen Berengia. Karen, I came to know Karen as a staunch advocate for school facilities in her community. And she boasted an incredible array of achievements while she was working in this community, including energy savings in almost every facility that she touched. She took advantage of almost every National Grid incentive that was available. She is here today representing the Energy Efficiency and Resource Management Council, and she will be offering final remarks or closing remarks. Karen?
Oh, thank you, Manuel. I was the energy manager for a very large school district here in the state of Rhode Island, and listening to you, Joe, talk, I just wanted to cry because sometimes too much information is just not a good thing. Knowing the ages of the buildings and the systems that they have in it, and they called me the energy czar, and they thought I wanted them just to shut off their computers, but it was just so much more than that. I was the one who asked the question about the whole building fan. I did not add that it was a gravity fan. So it was not a mechanical fan, it was a gravity fan. And it was so old and rusted that I really questioned whether it worked. And oftentimes I would be up on the roof checking and I wouldn't see it spinning, and it would make me a little bit nervous. I could relate to everything that Lauren was saying. And John, I remember when I was helping with the O&M manual like years and years ago. And it was a great honor to be able to help NEEP, update that manual every year that it was being updated. And I took care of the benchmarking of the buildings too. So yes, there was a lot of energy savings over the course of my tenure there in Cranston. Thank you, Manuel, for mentioning that. I sit on the Energy Efficiency and Resource Management Council. My chair is Workforce Development. And I just wanted to share our mission with all of you, which is the council's mission is to serve the Rhode Islanders in their homes and their businesses. We represent the needs by providing integrative, comprehensive stakeholder feedback about energy decisions. Our goal is to ensure that Rhode Islanders are getting the least expensive and most environmentally healthy energy supply through energy efficiency, conservation, and resource management. On behalf of the council, I would like to engage everybody to get engaged, to join us at one of our meetings. As you can see, there's a slide up. We have a meeting once a month. And send us your comments because we really want to hear from you. Your opinions are important, especially during these times right now. And engage yourself in some type of energy education. So if you are part of a school facility, there is a lot of things that you can take advantage of as far as National Grid is concerned, incentive programs on top of any monies that you may be able to get through grants that are out there now. I want to thank the moderator, Manuel, and I would like to thank John and Joe and Lauren for speaking on behalf of schools today. It's where my heart is, so I'm very passionate about it. I want to thank URI specifically because the council asked them if they would undergo the coordination of these lecture series, and they're doing an absolutely fantastic job. And I would like to thank everyone here today who's participated with their comments and their questions. I think that it's been a really good, engaging lecture series today because there were a lot of questions, and this is the time to hear about everything that's going on. And that we hope that you can join us for the next lecture that we have, which is November 18th, and it's on barriers to energy efficiency in rental and affordable housing. With that, I'm wondering if there are any more questions or if there's anything any of the panelists would like to add to the conversation, because it sounded like there were some really good thoughts out there and questions.
Thank you, Karen. This is Kate again from URI. I have to just say, as someone who, it's my job to convene these conversations, but I don't have the background or the breadth and in terms of what you all are talking about. But I am really inspired I live with 2 high school freshmen. I'm very thankful that there are such intelligent and compassionate people working on these issues. Just a small handful of who we heard from tonight. I really appreciate you, Dr. Allen, you, John, you, Lauren, and Manuel. I can't promise we're not going to ask you to moderate again because that was fantastic. And I appreciate you, Karen, sharing your personal experience as a school energy manager. I wanted to follow up and just say briefly that, you know, the work that we do through Extension is all about bringing science to people to help them solve problems. This was a tremendous example of that tonight. And a few folks mentioned the URI Energy Fellows program, which Lauren is here representing. And just to say it, she's not just an intern. She's a URI Energy Fellow. But that aside, we are always looking for new mentors for undergrad and graduate students like Lauren, who are interested in dipping their feet, if you will, into the energy sector and finding out where their place might be. And so if any of you are listening out there, or if there are students out there looking to be challenged, please get in touch with us. You can email me at kate@uri.edu. That email address makes me seem a lot more important than I actually am, but kate@uri.edu, easy to remember. Please get in touch if you'd like to mentor a student or if you'd like to be the next Lauren Hanna. But until next time, which is Wednesday, November 18th at 6:30, I could give you a preview of the program. We've been working on it and I'm really excited about it, but this one's going to be tough to top. So I hope to see you all Wednesday, November 18th at 6:30. Joe, John, Lauren, Manuel, thank you so very much. This was really great. Good night, everyone.